Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today we're going to be making some cherry jam, and I've already got my cherries measured out here. This is 4 pounds of sweet cherries. If you get the tart ones, you might have to use a little bit more sugar in these, but these are the sweet ones that I've got here. So I've got 4 pounds or about 8 cups, and we're going to set that to the side and we'll get back to those in just a minute. But with this recipe today, we are going to be canning our jars with our jam in it. So I'm going to go ahead and get my water bath canner here ready to go. If you have never water bath canned, I'll put a link in the description box below. I've got several videos on my channel where I go through all the equipment that you'll need and go through what those pieces of items are for your canning needs. So I'll put that link in the description box below. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start bringing this water up to about 180 degrees, and I've got my jars here. So what we'll be looking at here is you want to make sure that your canner, that you've got a rack in it. You do not want your jars sitting on the bottom of the water bath canner, because when it starts boiling, you don't want them bouncing around. So this gives it a little bit of extra space there between the bottom of the rack and the canner. So I've got my jars here, and this is going to make about 4 of these half-pint jars that I've got today. Depending on your cherries too, how many you get in there, how long it takes to cook to get them down to the jelly stage. It could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more. So I've got some extra ones here. So I've got 6 of these jars here. I've got them sterilized, I got them clean. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my jars, my 6 jars that I've got here, and I'm going to put them right side up in the bottom of my canner here that I've got. And then I'm going to start taking water and filling this up. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get 1 inch to 2 inches of water above the top of the jars. So I'm going to start filling up the jars themselves so that they're sitting on the bottom of the canner, and that way they won't be floating around. And then I'll continue to fill up my canner here until I get 1 to 2 inches of water above the top of the jars. And I'm going to go ahead and get this on the stove, because this takes a little while for that to heat that much water up. And once we get the cherries started and everything cooking on those, these will be up to temperature. And the reason we're heating these up, even though I've got these sterilized, is you want to put hot jam in hot jars. So once we get ready to start canning those, we'll put our hot jam into our jars, and that will take that risk out of those cracking. So I'm going to go ahead and give my jars here one last inspection. You want to make sure that there's no cracks or breaks on any of those jars that you've got. We'll line our canner here with those, fill it up with water, and I'll be back in just a minute. I am back, and I've got my jars now, my water bath canner, and that is heating up over there. And remember, that is 1 to 2 inches above the top of where those jars are in your canner. All right, so now we've got our cherries, and again, you can use the tart ones or you can use the sweet ones. I've got the sweet ones here. I've given them a good wash. You want to go in now and pull off these stems. And to make this job easier, I've got a cherry pitter that I've got here. We want to put that in, and we want to pit all of these cherries, and it just pops out. As easy as that. If you don't have one of these, you can use a chopstick or a straw, one of the metal straws. You can push it through there and push them out. I'm going to continue to work on this and take all of these pits out of these cherries, and I'll be back in just a minute. I am back, and I've got all of my cherries pitted now, and while I had done that, I went on and started cutting my cherries in half. So I've just got a knife here and our cherries, and I'm going to take those and just cut those right down the middle, just like that. And I'm going to finish these, and we'll move on to our next step. I've got all of my cherries now cut in half, and our recipe today, I'm not going to be using a commercial pectin. This is what this is. It's a real pectin from fruit, and they take it and formalize it commercially, and you can use it in your jams and jellies as a thickener. But we're not going to be using this today. The cherries do have some pectin in it. It's not a lot. And we're going to be adding a Granny Smith apple. Now the apples do have a lot of pectin in them, and we're going to be cut this up fine. You won't even taste it. It's in there. If you've seen my other recipe, I used this when I made some strawberry jam earlier. I'll put that link in the description box below if you want to go check that out. But you won't taste this in there, and it's just going to add a little bit more pectin in there to help thicken that up naturally. So I've got an apple core here. I've given this a nice little wash. And we'll take that out because I don't want those seeds in with that mixture. And then I'm going to take a peeler here, and I'm just going to go ahead and peel this apple. All right, now that I've got my apple peeled, I'm going to go ahead and cut that into little pieces. Let's just cut it in half. And there's still a little bit of seeds in there, so I'm going to go ahead and take those out. All right, now that I've got all of that cored up now, I'm just going to take these and slice these into little small pieces. All right, this is what we're looking at now with our apples. I'm going to go ahead and work on the rest of this. You won't even know that this is in there. This will cook down, and it's going to add all that extra pectin that's going to help our cherries gel. I've got my apple cut up now, and then I'm going to show you another trick here. We're going to see at the very end of when we get through cooking these, how this is going to show us whether or not our jam has gelled up. So this is just a saucer. I'm going to put this in the freezer and let this be chilling down, and it'll give us a clue at the end whether or not our jelly has gelled up. I'll be right back. Now that we've got everything prepared now, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn my pan on here, and I'm going to put that on high so that I can start to get the heat of that up. And I'm going to go ahead and add my cherries into my pot that I've got here. And then I'm going to put the apple in there. We'll add that in just like that. And now I've got some lemon juice. And when you're preserving jams and jellies and you're going to be canning them, you want to use the juice that you get processed, because you can control the acidity level that way. Because if you use the fruit like itself, like a lemon, each one that you have might be have a little different acidity level to it. And this way it's constant when you get ready to do that. So if you're going to be canning it like I'm going to be doing, you want to make sure that you use the processed lemon juice. And I want 2 tablespoons, and we'll add that right in. And now let's just give this a little stir around to kind of get some of that lemon juice on those before we put our sugar in. All right, now that I've got that mixed together, I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar. I've got 3 cups of sugar here. And again, these are the sweet cherries. I'm going to put 3 cups in. If you've got the tart ones, you might want to taste them to see if you might want to add a little bit more sugar. But this is 3 cups for our sweet cherries that we've got here. And once we get that in there, let's just give this a stir around. All right, I've got my candy thermometer here. I'm going to put this on the side, and we're going to continue to work on this. This should take anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes, and I want to bring this up to a boil. And then once it gets to a boil, we'll continue stirring on it until when I stir it with this spatula, it doesn't stop boiling. And then we'll turn it down just a little bit, and that will continue to bring this up to 220 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll come back and show you just in a minute the next process where we're at. It's been 5 minutes now, and I wanted to show you what this looks like. We've got some juice coming out of our cherries here, and the temperature now is at 135, so it is slowly climbing. So we'll just kind of stir this around just a little bit and get everything mixed together, and this will continue to cook down. You can already see how much this is cooked down just from once we started. So I'll come back in a few more minutes and show you more of the progress. It's now been 10 minutes. I wanted to show you what this looks like. Yours will probably cook a little bit faster if you're cooking it on the stove versus me on this plate that I've got here. So just continue to keep stirring on it. I've got some good steam coming up on it now, and my temperature is at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll continue to watch this, and I'll come back and show you more of the progress. My jam has come up to a boil now, and as you can see, I am stirring this and it is continuing to boil. So now I'm going to turn my pot down to about a medium, and that should cook this down to where we need it. And then we want to bring this up to 220 degrees, and that will pretty much indicate that we've got a good gel on this. So continue to work on this, don't leave it, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like when I'm finished. All right, I wanted to show you what this looked like. I just turned this off. My temperature did come up to 220 degrees, and it took just a little over 30 minutes, not much longer. But like I said, everybody's stove is going to cook a little bit differently. If you're cooking on a conventional stove, it might not take as long. But this plate that I was cooking on today took about a little over 30 minutes. So I wanted to kind of show you what this is cooked down to. And if you see, mine's got some nice chunks in mine where I just cut my cherries in half. But if you don't like it really chunky like that, you can definitely cut those down into quarters, and you can even cut them up just a little bit more if you don't want them that big, and that way when they cook down, you'll have more smaller pieces. But I kind of like the bigger pieces in there, and I'll show you now what we're going to do. So I just grabbed the plate out of the freezer, and I wanted to show you what that looks like. So we can see I've got some nice size pieces here for my cherries, and you can tell that it's thickened up some. So it's definitely a lot thicker. You can see that there's still a lot left behind. So what I'm going to do now that I've got my plate here that's frozen, I'm going to put just a little bit on it. I'm going to put this back in the freezer and let that sit in there for 5 minutes, and that will simulate it cooling down, and we'll see if it's gelled up. Now, when I learned how to can long time ago, we did heat the lids up. But now the USDA says we don't really have to do that because everything is going to be water bath canned for at least 10 minutes. You don't need to do that. So I'm going to put my lids in the jar, in the water here. It's just a habit of where I've done. And I'm not going to bring these up just to a little bit above room temperature. I'm going to put them on the stove, put them down on low, bring that water up just a little bit, and I'll come back and we'll see if our test jam in the freezer is ready to go. I've got my saucer now out of the freezer, and what you want to do now is you want to run your finger through it, and if it stays separate, then you know that your jam is gelled and ready to go. So let's get started canning our preserves. So at this point, if you don't want to can it, you can just put it in jars, put it in the refrigerator, and you can eat it that way. You'll need to eat it fairly quickly though, because it won't last a long time in the refrigerator. We're ready now to start canning our cherry jam. So let's get started. I'm going to go grab a couple of my jars, and we're going to be using one of these jar lifters that I've got here. This one's really nice because it's got a little lip on it. Do not use tongs. We want to be safe when we're canning because you're going to be dealing with hot jam and hot jars. We definitely don't want to get burned. So use something that's got a lip on it that'll be able to carry those jars, and we'll start this process. All right, so I've got my jar here. We're going to make this really easy. We need a funnel. We want to make sure that everything is really clean, and we've got a ladle here, and we're going to be ladling this hot cherry jam down into our jar. Now with this, we want a 1/4 inch headspace at the top, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's get started filling our jars. All right, so now I think I've got a 1/4 inch headspace on there. We're going to check that to make sure that that is what I'm looking at. So I'm going to remove my funnel. Now I've got a tool here, and I'm going to take this, and this is called a debubbler on this side. We want to make sure that there's no bubbles in the bottom of that, because if it has any bubbles in it and then you process it and then the headspace changes, you could go from a 1/4 down to a 1/2 or even down to 1 inch, and we definitely don't want that to happen. And so you can take this, each one of these little markings on here is a 1/4 inch. So if you take that to the side, looks like I need to put just a little bit more in this one, and I'm going to go ahead and debubble it before I do that. So what you want to do is just kind of run it down in there, make sure that there's no bubbles down in it, and then we can take it and we can measure it. I'm definitely going to need just a little bit more. So I put my funnel in, and I'm going to put just a little bit more in it, and let's give that a try. All right, now I'm at a 1/4 inch where I'm at. I don't want to make sure that anything hasn't changed with that, putting that extra ingredients in there, that we've got no bubbles down in the bottom. That is a very important part. You definitely don't want to miss that. We've got our 1/4 inch headspace. Now that we've got that measured out, I'm going to take a clean paper towel here, and I've got some vinegar, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to clean the top of our jar. And the reason we're doing that is because we don't want any of that jam that's on there to interfere with those lids from sealing. So you want to make sure that's absolutely clean, and that'll give you one more look to see if there's anything that's happened, if anything is broken while it was in the water bath over there warming up. So we've got that nice and clean now. I'm going to take this other tool. This is a little magnet, and it'll pick up one of my lids, and I'm going to put that right on the top of my jar. And then I'm going to take one of my rings, and I'm going to put that down on the top. Now when that comes to a stop like that on the top, we just want fingertip tight. This is hot, so be very careful. We still have hot jam in that hot jar, and what we want to do is just take it and just hit it like that until it stops. You don't better be wrenching down on the top of it and getting it tight. There's no need for all of that. We'll take this, we'll make sure that we get our lifting tool here, and we're going to take that back to our water bath canner, and we're going to put that back in there, and I'm going to continue to fill the jars up, and I'll let you know how many I get. I've got all of my jars filled up now, and I do have them in the water bath canner, and I just turned the heat back up on high on those and put the lid on it so they can come up to a boil. I want that to come to a rolling boil. I mean, when that starts boiling, you want to make sure that it's rolling, and then you want to set your timer for 10 minutes. So once the 10 minutes is up, you'll turn your heat source off, and you're going to let them sit in the water bath canner for 5 minutes before you take them out. And at that point, they'll be ready to be moved someplace that they'll be undisturbed so they can cool down. I want you to see how much I had left in this pot. 0. It took every bit of what I had here to fill that up. So it just depends on your cherries, how long you cook them for before they gel, because it could boil off a lot more of that moisture in. You could get less, you could get more. I got 6 today. So always have plenty of extra jars in your water bath canner to compensate for that, because you just never know. You might have one short or maybe a half of one that didn't get quite full, and you definitely want to do that. So I'm going to clean this all up. I'm got my timer set when the water bath canner hits a rolling boil at 10 minutes, and I'll be back. I am back, and I've got my preserves now out of the canner, And I wanted to go over that just to recap of what happened. So I did put the jars back in the water bath canner and put the lid on them, and they came to a rolling boil. I mean rolling boil. And you want to boil that for 10 minutes. So the 10 minutes is for the altitude. Oh, you just heard that seal. And if you've never canned before, you might not recognize what that is, but that tells you that this jar has sealed. So I want to talk about the 10-minute timer for just a little bit. That 10 minutes is for the altitude of where I'm at. So when you are water bath canning, the 10 minutes is based on an altitude below 1,000 feet. I'll put the different altitudes in the description box below. You got that with the times on them. So you need to know where you live and what altitude you're at to be able to know how long you need to process your jars. So I'm at 1,000 feet and below, so mine will process for 10 minutes. Then you'll take the lid off the water bath canner, turn the heat source off, and let them sit there for another 5 minutes. They're all pinging there as they're sealing down. So when you pick those up, just make sure you're picking them straight up. Don't turn them sideways like that. There'll be some water on the top of them. That's perfectly okay. There'll be enough heat coming out of that will evaporate off the top of those. So we want to let these sit somewhere where they will not be disturbed for 24 hours. And that way they'll have an opportunity to cool down and opportunity for all of those to seal. You'll be able to tell because on top of the ball jars there's a little dimple, and when it seals, that dimple will go down. And you'll be able to tell that that's sealed. That's not an indication that that did seal. That just means that indication telling you that potentially has sealed. So what's going to happen is once the 24 hours hit, you're going to take the bands. The bands will be loose on the top of it, and you want to take the band off. So take the band off of it, and then you can hold it by the lid, and that will tell you whether or not your jar is sealed. If the lid comes off, that means that did not seal, and at that point you can still use it. Just put it in the refrigerator, put your band back on it, and you can eat that one first. And if the rest of them do seal, put your label on it when you made them. That way you'll know where they are, and you'll be able to know what you've got in them. So a lot of the fruits and things, like this is my strawberry rhubarb. This has the same color consistency of this cherry, so you definitely want to know what you've got there. Once that 24 hours is up and you've checked to make sure that all of your jars are sealed, and you've taken the rings off of them, you want to make sure that you store your jars with the rings off of them. You don't want to leave the rings on them. Just say something happens in the near future and your lid comes unsealed, and then it might get a false seal because you've still got that ring on it and it might tighten back down again. You definitely don't want that to happen because it could introduce mold into your food, and you definitely don't want that to happen. So store your jams and things, anything that you can process like that, in your can shelf with the rings off. That way if it does happen to lose its seal, you'll know because it won't go back down on the top of it, and you can throw that one away. So while this is cooling, I did go ahead and clean everything else up in the kitchen here where this was at, and this was what I was able to get out, and I wanted to give this a taste test to see what this tasted like. So let's give this a try. That is absolutely delicious. I know you're going to love this recipe. If you've never made cherry jam before, give this recipe a try. I know you're going to love it. It is so easy to make as we saw here today. And if you make it just a little bit differently, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you on what you do different with yours. If you like this content, maybe you might consider giving me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And while you're at it, check out one of these other two videos over here on the side. You might find something else you'll like. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye now.